everybody. How are you? Good to see you. The day has arrived. And I had a hell of a time picking videos to show today because there are so many bad reviews and they're all so good and they all make such good points. And I was reminded of something. I was telling Crochetter this yesterday. I don't know how many of you are old enough. Hi, everybody. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember the Kathie Lee Gifford Christmas specials. She would dress her family up in sweaters and decorate the set or her house, if it was filmed at her house. And they were incredibly corny and cheesy. And, you know, every now and then there would be a knock at the door and she would go over to the door and she would open the door. Oh, hello, look at who it is. It's Aaron Neville or, you know, whatever celebrity. And poor Frank would be there, Frank Gifford, you know, in some stupid sweater and the kids and everything. And then the musical guests would sit at the piano and they would all sing. And it was very, very corny. I mean, it was the 90s, you know. If it had been like the 60s, it would have been different, or even the 70s. But it was the 90s and people were cynical and everything. And at ABC every year, the one thing that we would look forward to was the review in the Washington Post by Tom Shales, who was their TV critic. And I don't know what it was, but it was almost like Kathie Lee Gifford became Tom Shales's muse. And every year he would write a review of these shitty Christmas specials. And he would pull out all the stops. And every year his reviews were better and better and better. And so nobody really cared about the specials. What everybody wanted to do was read Tom Shales's roasting of these terrible TV shows. So there's something particularly special about a bad review. I mean, anybody can write a good review. Anybody can gush and pick out points of something that they like, but it takes a real skill to write a truly bad review. And I'm telling you, YouTube is packed with bad reviews of Snow White. And we're going to watch a couple of these videos that I thought did the movie justice. They're particularly well written. They're particularly well executed. So I thought we would watch a few of those videos. But before we get to that, I wanted to point something out. So Hekate's new favorite little mascot, Russ, has really outdone himself on Twitter. Now, Hekate has made it abundantly clear that she doesn't care that Russ is a liar. It doesn't matter to her. Hi, Jen. It's like, well, what difference does it make? Well, I'll tell you what difference it makes. When you have somebody like him who thrives on attention and tends to lose his mind when he gets attention from women, he goes too far. He always goes too far. And this is why he's been kicked out of every single community that he's ever been in. When you enable somebody like him, he will always find a way to go too far. And he did it on, pressure. And what he did was, we know that for years he has been claiming that he had a relationship with a girl named Valentina Lore, a girl that he has been stalking for years. He has never met this girl, by his own admission. I know that he keeps going back and forth, and he gets attention by mentioning her name over and over and over and over again. He never met her. They never had a relationship. They don't know each other. Hello, Janine. Now what he's done is he has yet again doxed Valentina Lore's parents on Twitter. He put up their full names, their birth dates, and everything else. He is actively harassing these two people who are the parents of a girl that he has been stalking for years and he has never met. This is what he does when you encourage him. This is what he does when you don't call him out on his lies. His mother won't do anything about him. His mother apparently can't or won't control him. And so now he's decided to dox and target two people who are the parents of a girl he does not know, who he's obsessed with, who he's been stalking, again, for years, whose underage pictures he has saved and shared all over social media. And that is why it matters, Hecate, that he's a liar. It matters. These people, these parents of this girl, are non-combatants. And we know that doxing is not exactly a practice that is welcome in the community these days because some people take it too far. Now, I don't know what it's going to take to make this guy stop and leave people alone. Maybe somebody will reach out to the Lores and let them know that there's a creep and a weirdo who's been stalking their daughter for upwards of, 8 years? It won't be me. I'm too lazy. And I don't do shit like that. But I'm just saying that, Hecate, this is who you brought into your community, and eventually you are going to learn why it is that he has been shunned everywhere. He was kicked out of Peanut's community when her chat told her it's either us or him. Either he goes or we go. So, and he's been consistent, asking women for money, posting inappropriate content in Discord servers, being creepy, weird, and inappropriate with women, sending multiple DMs, trying to get attention. So he's your problem now, Hecate, and everybody who enables him and laughs off his rape fantasies and laughs off his unhinged stalkerish behavior and making fake police calls and trying to do the utmost to get attention. It is gross. So Hecate, he's, like I said, he's your problem. Now, if you condone doxing two completely innocent non-combatants, then that says a lot about you. You probably do. But anyway, yeah, I know, T-Girl. I know. He fits right in with that community. But, she likes to pretend that she's very holier than thou and out there, defending victims from predators and all this shit. She couldn't care less. If you did, you wouldn't have Russ in your community. All right, let's get down to Snow White. Now, what am I going to play first? Now, I want to put everything into perspective, okay? The 1937 animation of Snow White put Disney on the map. It was Walt Disney's personal project. It is such a beloved property, such a beloved story, and means so much in terms of Disney lore that when you go to the Disney headquarters, the Seven Dwarfs, statues, carvings of the Seven Dwarfs are above the entrance. So when they decided to do a live action version of Snow White okay? I mean, they've done live actions of Beauty and the Beast and Cinderella, and they've been successful, they've done well, and that kind of thing. But Snow White was in a different category for Disney. And the production was plagued with problems. Now, a lot of people are going to make the excuse, well, we had the strike and we had this. No. Wicked managed to film and turn out a beautiful product despite the strike. And Wicked was also delayed because of the strike. The real problem with Snow White is that they wanted to release a film for modern audiences, a woke Snow White that literally not a single person asked for. And their star, Rachel Zegler, was controversial because she is Hispanic and she didn't quite fit the Snow White image because, as you know, in the story, Snow White is described specifically. Skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, hair as black as ebony. It could not be clearer what Snow White looked like, according to the brothers Grimm, who wrote the original story. Rachel Zegler bafflingly, because she was basically unmoored during the strike, was interviewed during the strike, and she has made it abundantly clear that she is a very entitled, very spoiled actress, way beyond any of her accomplishments. She's not a big star. I mean, she starred in West Side Story. She was excellent in West Side Story. And she was in one of those Hunger Games, Tales of Mockingbirds and I don't know what. Oh, I am so glad. I am so glad. I'm so glad you loved it. Oh, God, here goes another one in the cult. And, you know, it's funny because you bring up Wicked. Now, the Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande press tour for Wicked was widely mocked, deservedly so. But the movie came out, and it was incredible. And as annoying as Cynthia Erivo can be when she's interviewed, that woman's talent makes up for however annoying she is when she's giving an interview. Cynthia Erivo is an extraordinary talent, like a voice of a generation. And Wicked is magnificent. It's magnificent. So it is possible to make up for a disastrous press tour if you release a really great product at the end of it, right? I cannot even tell you how many times I've cried because of Defying Gravity. I told you the story. I burst into tears at the theater. The theater is right up the street from the store. I drove to the store. I walked in. Negz took a look at me and was like, "What happened?" And I started crying again. And I said, "The movie was so good." And I was sobbing. And now every time I fire up Wicked on streaming, I go straight to the end of the movie. Actually, I go to Oz. Not Oz, but the Emerald City scene when they arrive in the Emerald City. And by the time I watch Defying Gravity for the 100th time, I'm crying for the 100th time. I absolutely love it. I am so excited. And Crochetter and I are like, God, November, come November, because we're so excited to see part 2. Absolutely the same. Hey, Stuart's mom, good to see you. All right. And I want to point something else out about Wicked, too. Wicked is the highest grossing musical of all time. It surpassed The Lion King. And so it already had this huge built-in audience of theater nerds who loved the musical. Making it into a movie was a challenge because you have to please the audience that has seen the play or the musical in the theater and fallen in love with it. You have to make people happy who have not seen the musical. You have to make people happy who don't like musicals. You have to be able to please a fan base beyond just like the musical nerds and the theater kids, right? And that's exactly what Wicked accomplished. It did it beautifully, you know? And so that is an example of a movie where the director knew exactly what the right notes were, no pun intended. Snow White, not so much. All right, let's pull up the first review. Okay, I think that this one, I think the title says it all. Snow White is a bona fide piece of shit. Short but sweet by Echo Chamberlain. Let's hear what Echo Chamberlain had to say.
Snow White, whose trailer accrued a staggering 1 million dislikes, is a sanitized product that takes a cherished, simple fairy tale, makes it look ugly as all hell, radiates corporate risk-averse unease, and has more baggage than a therapist's waiting room.
I'm disappointed in your species.
With its long, static scenes, ridiculous anti-climax, and CGI monstrosities, it is one of the most boring pieces of garbage you'll ever see.
Yikes.
From an entertainment company that now looks discontentedly at its own source material. You can feel the strain of trying to appeal to everyone, caught both the purists and the pro-modernization contingent, and delighting
which is something that Wicked did beautifully and Snow White failed to do.
no one. A lot of people are saying in the film's defense that it isn't a terrible failure, it isn't too bad, or that it is actually surprisingly okay. But it's Snow White. If you remake Snow White and it's just okay, that is a terrible failure.
Exactly.
Rachel Zegler's wide-eyed Snow White with her Lord Farquhar hairstyle doesn't just hope her prince will come, she wants to be a good leader for her people. Rather than a yearning for love and adventure and charming frolics, the main drive of this Snow White is to restore the kingdom's faith in the social contract.
Okay, and just so that you guys know, I don't know if he's going to mention it in this review, but there were two dodges in the movie. First one is they had to explain why the Snow White in the live action did not have skin as white as snow. And so the explanation was that she was named Snow White because she was born during a snowstorm. The second dodge is there was something else. God damn it. Why don't I make notes before I speak? There was the skin as white as snow dodge. I know I'm going to remember it. I'm sorry, you guys. I did want to put one thing into context. Disney is really, really in trouble. It's in trouble. Okay? They sank an enormous amount of money into this movie. An enormous amount of money. Oh, and the second dodge. Who's the fairest of them all? Okay? It is obvious within the context of not only the story, but the original movie, that fairest is meant to mean who is the most beautiful of them all. Who is the most beautiful girl in the kingdom? Who's the most beautiful woman in the kingdom? In this version of Snow White, fair is supposed to mean who is fair as in equitable, who is fair as in like kind. And nobody bought it. Nobody bought it, you know. And especially when you cast Gal Gadot, who is fucking stunning, all right? And you have her looking in a mirror, who's the fairest of them all, and then the mirror has to break the news to her that it's Rachel Zegler in that terrible haircut. No. So they had to change it around a little bit. And that is, it's funny though. You got to admit, it's har. But what I was going to say was, we've already had some disasters for Disney in the Marvel universe. The Marvels was a huge flop. The new Captain America is the lowest grossing Marvel film of all time. The Ant-Man sequel was a disaster. We've had a series of flops with Pixar. We have problems at Lucasfilms who have driven Star Wars into the ground, who have ruined the Indiana Jones franchise. Okay? And the other problem is that all their movies have these ridiculous, monstrous cost overruns. And the TV shows that they produce for Disney Plus, the Star Wars films, they cannot control a budget at Disney. Now, if you hear that a movie like Snow White cost anywhere between $270 million and $350 million to film, then by God, you're going to expect to see something pretty spectacular. And if you don't see where the money went, then you're going to have some questions. Let's continue.
Gal Gadot can't sing, or act especially, and gives off vague dominatrix vibes in her leathery, tight costumes. Then there are the dwarves. In the original film, there is a visual plushness. These dwarves are an uncanny, unholy VFX disaster.
Horrible.
Figures from one of those Hieronymus Bosch visions of hell.
Not
They
Hieronymus
slow the film
Bosch.
into a crawl every time they appear, and there's no sense of their glowing enchanted forest meshing with scenes shot in real woodlands, or the
And I wanted to mention something about the dwarves. People have been talking about how the dwarves are uncanny valley. The dwarves are hideous. That with the exception of 3 of the dwarves, the other 4 remaining ones, you can't tell them apart. They all look exactly the same. I saw the actor and I can't remember his name, but he was Hornswoggle in the WWE, but he's also an actor. And he was on Piers Morgan, and he made a fantastic point. Okay. And the point was that when you're talking about 7 dwarves in a movie, you're not just talking about the actors who play the dwarves on screen. You're talking about 7 stuntmen, and you're talking about 7 stand-ins. So that's 21 acting parts that were robbed from dwarf actors for absolutely no reason, because Peter Dinklage went on a podcast and made some idiotic statement about the dwarves living in a cave or some bullshit like that. When Peter Dinklage knows goddamn well that the dwarves were the heroes of the story, you know, and to remove the dwarves from the story, which Disney was going to do, by the way, was a huge, huge, huge mistake. A huge mistake. And then they had to horn the dwarves back in. And by the time they decided that they were going to put the dwarves in, they were still sticking to their idiotic decision not to cast 7 little people actors and instead make these CGI monstrosities. So now absolutely no one is happy. Let's continue.
Dwarves themselves belonging alongside live people. Disney should be embarrassed with its resources to have created such lame animated characters, lacking in clarity and definition, who seem to floatingly swirl and caper without depth and weight, whose resting faces are disconcerting, and who look about as good as the Smurfs from 15 years ago.
They do look like the
All the
Smurfs.
sadder for the extraordinary, captivating innovations of the original renderings.
Yep.
Zegler's Snow White, the orphaned princess of a once thriving kingdom, lives under the rule of her stepmother, the evil queen. The story follows a lot of the beats of the original, but is then stretched out with the addition of a group of DEI bandits who also live in the woods and who might have been intended to have a prominent or central role in the film before the socio-cultural sewer pipe explosion forced Disney to fall back on refocusing on the dwarves.
Okay, so now this is what happened. They had what people were sarcastically referring to as the 7 diversity hires or the 7 Portland baristas or whatever. And they looked like something out of a Renaissance fair, you know, like people that you would meet at the Society for Creative Anachronism. So you had those 7 characters. And when that still came out, when that still leaked, people went berserk. Like, oh my God, you replaced the dwarves with that? And so then they had to shove the dwarves back in, but they kept the 7 bandits in. And in the 7 bandits, there is a dwarf. Oh, you know what? I was going to play the fish jelly reviews video because it was really, really, really good. I really enjoyed it. And it was very, very shady. And they were the ones who kept on returning to, I can't believe that this movie cost this much, and the costumes look like something out of Party City. The wigs are bad. You know, you don't see where the money was spent. And I heard one person on a panel say that they are convinced that this film was made purely to launder money because you don't know where the hell the money was spent. You can't see it. With Wicked, you can see it. With Cinderella, you can see it. But with this movie, no, you can't see it.
That the bandit screen time feels oddly truncated and chopped up, and the narrative loses natural emphasis and cohesion. The leaked photo of the bandits a year or more ago were misconstrued as the new dwarves, which precipitated much of the backlash to begin with. The film can't establish a consistent tone through its real and artificial locations. The film feels compromised and small, that the life and spirit of it has been scuffed away in the edit and reshoots. There is a palpable sense of unease about dwarves being in the film, but also the impossibility of them not being there. An uncertainty about the proportionality and dominance and coherence of cartoonishness and realism, so that the finished product feels half-baked and half-hearted. Visually, the film is disgusting, gaudy, as if practically all the filters had been turned way up, making it too rich.
It's
so that
very
it has a
yellow.
kind of gauzy saturation.
Yeah.
At times, there is an unpleasant murk, punctuated by flashes of starkness. It is a fantasy aesthetic that looks almost cheap and conventional, and the castle
Very
scenes,
cheap.
sometimes
Very
like
cheap.
Wheel of Time or Damsel or Willow or Blood Origin. And out in the fairy tale meadows and mines and interiors, it is like the kind of illustrations on biscuit tins or chocolate boxes manufactured in China.
I heard one person make this hilarious comparison between the forest setting and how cheap it looks and how tacky it looks, and they said it looks like a Thomas Kincaid painting. And I thought that was very, very clever. I wish I had thought of that myself.
Traditional romantic European vistas, which is an oddly incongruous environment for a half-Colombian woman to be frolicking about in. Snow White looks cheap as hell. The depth perspective is garbage. The seven dwarves, the magic mirror, and so many other aspects of the visuals look like relics from the early aughts. Contrast this with the work the team behind Wicked did, with real sets and a budget of about 100 million less. And again,
a lot
you
less.
have to wonder, where the hell Disney spent its resources for this movie?
Correct.
In a blatant attempt by Disney to cover its own ass, it cast little person George Appleby as Quig, a bandit. If that's okay, then why didn't they cast others from the little person community as the seven dwarves? Why bother reimagining them to begin with? Again, it is the frustrating flakiness of pandering, with Appleby's casting being used as a peace offering with that community, in the most hollow and insincere way, the studio protecting itself from a controversial decision they had already committed to. Instead of a prince who appears only to awaken the princess, we have Jonathan, played by Andrew Burnhap, an erstwhile actor who lives in a liminal space where actions and motives are not well defined.
What the fuck does that mean? Who lives in a liminal space where actions and motives are not well defined. Oh my God. This is how I used to write when I was in college. When I had to incorporate all that bullshit critical theory jargon in my papers, especially at the graduate level. A liminal space where actions and motives are not well defined. For fuck's sake.
So says
He's a bandit, for God's sake.
Screenplay writer Erin Cressida Wilson, who previously wrote the screenplays for Secretary, an erotic romance comedy drama film that explores the intense relationship between a dominant lawyer and his submissive secretary, who
Secretary was a really good movie, by the way.
Indulge in various types of BDSM activities such as erotic spanking and pet play. And Fur, about a man named Lionel who has hypertrichosis, which means his body is covered in hair and he is in demand as a wig maker. And Men, Women and Children, which follows a wife who starts having affairs through the social media website Ashley Madison, and her husband who regularly sees escorts through another site, and their teenage son Chris who is addicted to porn and has found himself only able to become aroused by material not deemed socially normal. Why the fuck is this the person above anyone else roped in to do the screenplay for Snow White?
Okay,
Rachel Zegler is a shining supernova in
This
Snow
is the
White,
other problem.
whose trailer accrued a not deemed socially normal. Why Peter Dinklage described the decision
Wait a minute,
to
let me go
retell the
back.
story
Sorry,
of
I skipped.
Instead, we got this never-ending
Here we go.
receptive to the idea of taking their kids to the cinema. We would also have judiciously ignored Peter Dinklage's maundering remarks in a podcast and cast Blake Johnson and Chun Tan and Tony Cox.
That's the guy I was
and
talking
Warwick
about.
Davis. And their veteran acting chops and comedic interplay would have been delightful.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, it would have been great.
Instead, we got this never-ending shit show. The debate around the film began making headlines in January 2022 when Game of Thrones star Peter Dinklage described the decision to retell the story of 7 dwarves living in a cave as backward on the Mark Maron podcast.
Ridiculous.
I was a little taken aback by the fact they were very proud to cast a Latina actress as Snow White, he said. You're
Why?
progressive in one way, but then you're still making that backward story about 7 dwarves living in a cave together? Have I done nothing to advance the cause from my soapbox? I guess I'm not loud enough.
Advance what cause? The cause of getting you cast in every role meant for a little person actor, Peter Dinklage, and then pulling the ladder up behind you and screwing other people in the community. What an asshole, you know? What an absolute waste. What a shame. And what a terrible thing to do to little people actors in the community who aren't exactly, the last time I checked, being swamped with job offers. Okay. So it was just a horrible, backstabbing, terrible thing for Peter Dinklage to do. It just sucked. And believe me, there's a lot of anger and bitterness. Now, there's been a lot of talk about how Gal Gadot cannot sing, how she was miscast. And I saw that a couple of people suggested that it would have been a role that should have gone to Christine Baranski. That would have been a great decision, because I love Christine Baranski. The woman is a fucking goddess, okay? And it would have been great to see her in that role, but Gal Gadot it is.
In a statement released after Dinklage's comments, Disney said they were taking a different approach with these 7 characters and had made their decision to use CGI after consulting with members of the dwarf community.
I think this isn't
Sure.
idea.
Okay, thoughts? Well, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to second that motion.
Okay, let's see. Let's see if we're both right.
Disney said it would avoid reinforcing stereotypes from the original animated film.
What stereotypes?
Dr. Erin Pritchard, senior lecturer in disability and education at Liverpool Hope University
Oh,
and a
God.
consultant for Disney, said she's glad that they are now magical creatures instead of dwarves. My research shows that a lot of abuse people with dwarfism experience
You're
in
probably
society
right.
is influenced by Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Screeches.
Are you actually mental? Abuse of little people derives in large part from their depiction in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
That is
How much
insane.
of an anal retentive little busybody do you have to be to make such a po-faced pronouncement?
Ridiculous.
Until she understands the concept of people wanting to make a living and being quite capable of determining and wanting to regulate and condition how they are perceived and in what
Exactly.
roles. Early in the film's production, there was controversy around Disney's decision to cast Ziegler in the role of a character deemed to have skin as white as snow. Someone like Morgan Freeman as Red in Shawshank Redemption, or Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury are irresistible diverse changes, because those guys are fucking awesome, and super cool, and everyone loves them, and they make practically everything better because they're beloved cultural icons. Rachel Zegler isn't.
Yeah, I mean, you can put Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman in any goddamn movie ever, and seeing them on screen elevates the movie. I mean, honestly, Denzel Washington was the only good thing about, well, not the only good thing, the only good human element of Gladiator 2. He stole every scene. He chewed up the scenery. He looked amazing. Every scene with him in it was memorable. And the only other elements of Gladiator 2 that were worth seeing were the sharks in the Colosseum and the rhinos and the Colosseum scenes. And, you know, Ridley Scott is incredible at staging battle scenes. So those were good too. But Denzel Washington can appear in any movie he wants. Race swap everybody. Let him play Bill Clinton. I don't care. The man is incredible, and seeing him on screen is a joy. Same thing with Morgan Freeman. They make everything better when you see them on screen. And incidentally, the new Captain America did not flop because they race swapped Captain America. There were a lot of problems with the script. The people who are like the diehard comic book fans who were very invested in Captain America did not like the way that the character was rewritten. It wasn't the race swap. It wasn't the actor's fault. It was the fault of the shitty story and the terrible script.
This, of course, led to the kind of torturous contrivances that Hollywood screenwriters fling together that convince no one, are so thin and artificial and nominal that it gets people's backs up, and rightly so. A lame framing device where Snow White was born during a snowstorm, therefore she is Snow White, which might just as easily have seen her christened Grey Mist, or the disappointing porn version.
It is a Thomas
slightly
Kincaid
damp.
movie.
The contrivance is cringe. Ziegler also made headlines after she made critical comments about some elements of the previous animated film. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
I
Ziegler
remember
said.
that.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
Great.
Ziegler also called the original film extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power, adding, people are making these jokes about ours being the PC Snow White, where it's like, yeah, it is, because it needed that.
Okay, nobody
After
wanted
all
that.
This mega disastrous build-up, the European premiere, which would ordinarily be held at a high-profile glitzy location, such as London's Leicester Square, was instead held at a medieval castle in northern Spain. Most media outlets were not invited to set up their cameras on the
I'll
battlements,
bet.
and Zegler instead performed to a relatively small crowd. With just the basics of common sense, this Snow White would have been a license to print money and be on the way to making $1 billion. Combining the net production costs and estimated marketing expenses, the overall investment in Snow White is projected to be around $314 million.
It's obscene.
To break even, it will need to gross approximately $600 million worldwide. It is projected to make about $50 million on its opening weekend.
What a disaster.
So, good luck with that, Disney.
Okay, so that was review number 1. The next one is from The Critical Drinker. It's quite short. He gets to the point fairly quickly, and it's Snow White. It's even worse than I expected. I'm a big fan of The Critical Drinker, and I'm not trying to highlight reviews by red-pilled movie critics. All of the movie critics hated it. All of them. And they all pointed out the same thing. It looks cheap. The costumes don't fit. Especially Rachel Zegler's Snow White princess costume does not fit properly. It looks like it was picked off the rack at Party City or ordered off of Amazon. The wigs are a disaster. The dwarves are a disappointment. The story makes absolutely no sense. You could tell that the script was written and tinkered with by too many people. The final edit was very confusing, and there were too many storylines that didn't fit together. Too many illogical dead ends in the story. And it's Snow White, for God's sake. How hard is it to make Snow White? For fuck's sake. I think we all know the story. All right, let's see what the Critical Drinker had to say.
And now that I've finally suffered through nearly 2 hours of Snow White, I can confidently tell you that, yes, this film absolutely lived up to all my worst expectations, and in some cases even exceeded them. A bloated, overstuffed turkey of a production, weighed down by hammy acting, cheap costumes, horrendous CGI, and vomit-inducing cinematography that bungles most of the elements it steals from the original animated movie, abandons its classic ideals of self-sacrifice, heroism, and true love, and injects the lethal dose of the message.
No, you know what's weird, you guys? I see that you guys are posting Greta Gerwig. Greta Gerwig was involved in the writing of the script, but the final credit does not go to Greta Gerwig. Somebody else ended up getting saddled with that terrible dishonor. But Greta Gerwig does not have the final writing credit of this movie. Because when I heard that Greta Gerwig had written the script, I thought, oh, okay, well, we have some hope, because she did such a great job turning Barbie meta. And I thought, all right, well, if she had something to do with it, then there's hope. But no, she was one of the people who participated in it. Let me see the name of the screenwriter. It was that lady that he was referring to who wrote the movie Secretary. Screenwriter Snow White. Oh boy. Oh, you guys. Now I think that I see the problem. Remember when I said it was written by committee? Look at this. Those were the people who wrote Snow White. Greta Gerwig is among them, but it's this, okay, so Greta Gerwig and then this Erin Cressida Wilson lady, who gets the final writing credit for Snow White. Let me see what they say about Greta Gerwig. It says here, Greta Gerwig was never the original writer. It has always been Erin Cressida Wilson. Gerwig said herself she only took a pass at the script for 2 weeks. Okay, so that was the thing. It wasn't Greta Gerwig. It was that Erin Cressida Cassandra Wilson lady or whatever. All right, let's go back to the Critical Drinker. Is he on screen? Now he is. All right. All right, let's
Which
go.
is so redundant and thematically contradictory that it just gets abandoned by the ends. It's also laughably obvious where they've had to reshoot and rewrite big chunks of this movie in response to all the backlash. Entire subplots, characters, and setups are introduced and then abandoned without explanation, and the ending is so wildly anticlimactic and jarring that it makes World War Z look like a model of cinematic efficiency.
Yikes.
Anyway, let's get the plot summary over with so we can put this turd behind us. The basic setup for Snow White is broadly similar to the original film. Snow White herself is born to the benevolent king and queen of a generic medieval fantasy land that tactfully goes unnamed. Although, fuck me, they must have pretty good transportation links with the rest of the world, because the population here is more ethnically diverse than central London. Anyway, Snow White's mum dies and her dad remarries Gal Gadot, who manipulates him into going off to war, where he promptly disappears and is never seen again. Oh no, guess she's gonna have to take control of everything. What a bind. Fast forward a few years and the kingdom's become a kind of dystopian nightmare where everyone's poor and hopeless and ruled over by an iron-fisted tyrant. It's a
Oh, funny you should ask. Funny you should ask, because, you know, the Daily Wire is producing their own version of Snow White, starring Brett Cooper. Hello, Instant Karma Reviews. How are you? It is good to see you. We're all participating in this Snow White schadenfreude of misery. The Daily Wire is producing, I don't know, Suzetters. I don't know. The last time I checked, her picture was still listed on IMDb. So, oh, good. I'm glad to hear it, Instant Karma. It's good to have you here. Brett Cooper fits the bill as Snow White, and they were going to do that as a counter to this garbage, right? I am hoping that they pull it off. I really am, because I think that we need a counter to this shitty, lousy Snow White that everybody knew was going to be a bomb. And I'm curious to see what they do. They'll probably, all that you have to do to remake Snow White is stick to the original goddamn story. That's all. It's not complicated. All right, let's continue.
It's a bit like modern day Britain, only with better sanitation and dental care. Anyway, after
Clara
a confrontation
Bixby,
with
how are
Snow
you?
White over a bandit named Jonathan who tried to steal some food from the castle, the evil queen decides the best thing to do is send her out into the forest where the huntsman can conveniently murder her. It's a bit extreme, but I'll let it slide. Naturally, the huntsman has second thoughts and decides to let her go, and after wandering alone for a while, she runs into 7 dwarves that I can only describe as the kind of thing that Cthulhu probably has nightmares about. I'm not kidding, man. The brief glimpses that you got of these things in the trailers are absolutely nothing compared to the existential horror of actually witnessing them on the big screen. These are nightmares made real. Like if you woke up in the middle of the night and saw Mr. Blobby standing at the foot of your bed.
What a shame!
Silent, motionless, watching you with those blank, lifeless eyes that bore into your very soul. So after crashing at their house for a while, eating their food and helping herself to all of their resources, Snow White helpfully forces them to clean up their own home while she prances around like she's on some mad acid trip.
And you know, that's the other major change from the original Snow White. Because in the original Snow White, she cleans the house to show her gratitude for their hospitality. And here, she just bosses them around in their own home after breaking and entering. And it really changes the tone of the movie for absolutely no reason. Let me see. You know, there is apparently an explanation in the movie for why her hair looks like that. And Karsten sent me a screenshot of it was made by a lady who did a redesign of the costume and of the haircut. And the way that she did it, it was so simple. Just add a few inches to the bob. Take those long sleeves off, because in the original, she wasn't wearing long sleeves. There's no need for that. And for God's sake, send the woman to a tailor so that her costume fits properly, because throughout the movie, it's very, very distracting. Let's go.
Which she probably is, to be fair. I would be if I was in this fucking movie. Then for some reason she gets it into her head that her dad must still be alive, and the only way to find him is to seek out the bandits that lurk in the forest.
I love her shoes, though. I would wear those shoes.
So naturally, she runs into Jonathan about 5 minutes after leaving the house so that the rest of the plot can happen, and he protects her from the evil queen's soldiers by taking an arrow that was meant for her, so she brings him back to the dwarves to get fixed up. Oh yeah, you know those retarded looking Starbucks baristas from those early set pictures that everyone thought were the dwarves? Well, those are the bandits, who are actually out of work actors forced to become thieves because the evil queen's taxation policies shut down their entire industry. Is that a reference to something? Is that a reference to something?
Whistle while you work. You know, I hear that there's some weird change that they made in the story that Snow White introduces the dwarves to whistling. I'm not sure if that's true, that they had never heard whistling before, which is very strange because don't they sing Whistle While You Work? No, they sing Hi-Ho as they're on their way back and forth. And apparently there were changes made to Hi-Ho, which is absolutely unfucking forgivable. And the new songs are horrendous. I mean, they might as well have hired Diane Warren to write those awful new songs. They're like the typical pap Disney songs that we've come to expect, the ones that are nominated for Oscars that are just crappy. And a lot of hay was made out of the fact that they got the guys who composed The Greatest Showman to write these songs. They're bad songs. They're bad songs. And by bad, I mean they're bad compared to the original songs from the original movie from 1937 that were brilliant, brilliant songs. I don't know why Disney does this. You know, I was telling Karsten that one of my all-time favorite Disney animation songs is from The Jungle Book. I Want to Be Like You, the song that King Louie sings to Mowgli. And in the original one, the version sung by Louis Prima, it's very, very colorful, and all the animals pick up instruments, and they all play along, and King Louie is dancing, and it's such a joyous, wonderful, I want to be just like you, blah, 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 you know, and it's such a jazzy, hip tune. And I found a video on YouTube about how Louis Prima, when Louis Prima would play with his band, he would start at the beginning and the band would line up behind him in like an S formation, and they would all walk behind him, you know, playing their instruments, and it inspired the scene in the animation. It is an explosion of joy, one of the greatest numbers ever in a Disney film. And then you look at the live action version of it, and it's very, very dark, and King Louie is huge and really, really scary, and the song is slowed down, and King Louie is really menacing. And I thought, why would you do that to this beautiful, happy, upbeat song? It was just sad. So when Disney makes changes, sometimes they make changes that make absolutely no sense. Let's continue.
Is that a reference to something?
No idea. Anyway, Jonathan decides to lure the Queen's soldiers away to give Snow White time to escape.
Agreed.
And then immediately gets captured because he's a bumbling idiot. And the evil Queen decides that she's had enough of this shit. Frankly, one sympathizes. So she turns herself into an old hag and manipulates Snow White into eating a poisoned apple that makes her go a bit dead. But that's okay because Jonathan escapes prison so that the rest of the plot can happen and gives her the world's least passionate kiss, which brings her back to life so that she can begin her cunning plan to overthrow the Queen and take back her kingdom.
Okay.
Do you want to know what that plan is? Are you ready for the fourth dimensional quantum mega chess that she plays here that would probably give Christopher Nolan a brain hemorrhage? Well, she walks into town and then convinces the soldiers to turn against the evil Queen because she can remember their names.
Really?
I'm not kidding, that's her plan. So the evil Queen gets mad and smashes the magic mirror and then turns into black glass and shatters, and Snow White becomes the new queen, and that's it. They all live happily ever after.
And of course, what does she do? She takes they take the agency away from the dwarves, because if you remember in the original story, the dwarves chased the queen to a cliff and the queen goes off the cliff and the dwarves save Snow White and they save everybody and they're the heroes of the movie, which again makes you question why the hell would Peter Dinklage claim that the dwarves were bad role models or stereotypes or, presented an unfavorable image of dwarves when they save everybody. They save Snow White, they save the kingdom, they get rid of the evil queen. It's infuriating. It's infuriating. And when I think of those incredible actors that could have depicted the dwarves and all the jobs that were lost because of Peter Dinklage's weird view and the way that he spitefully tried to keep his fellow dwarf actors from finding employment, it makes me feel a certain type of way. All right.
Now, there's a lot I want to say about this movie, but first, let us begin with the positives. And as hard as it might be to believe, most of them actually concern Rachel Zegler.
No way!
Now, don't get me wrong, she might be an obnoxious arsehole in the real world, but credit where credit's due here, she actually isn't terrible as Snow White.
It's not true! That's impossible!
I mean, her outfit looks like it cost like $100 off Amazon.
Right?
Her haircut makes Anton Chigurh like a cutting-edge trailblazer. Her performance is a bit over the top and theatre kid at times, and her American accent comes and goes depending on whether or not she's in a reshoot. But I do get the impression she's at least trying to do her best with the material, and she can absolutely belt out the musical numbers, which is pretty much what you'd expect from a trained vocalist.
Oops. Sorry, guys. I did
The
it
Wrong
again.
Reasons, starring all the White back to life, was absolutely added in later to try to appease fans of the location in a real forest.
Wait a
and
minute.
the contrast between that and the CGI act. It takes a special kind of charisma, presence.
Okay. I'm sorry. I keep on clicking on. This is why I need to make this bigger so that I don't click mistakenly. Rachel Zegler was good in West Side Story. She's got a fantastic voice. There's no question about it. But anybody who has seen West Side Story, any version of West Side Story, knows that Maria and Tony are kind of drips in the movie. I mean, yeah, or in the story, they're the focus of it. But the real stars of West Side Story are Riff, Bernardo, and Anita. They are the real stars. And in the Spielberg movie, all three roles were played incredibly by those actors, especially Anita. And she won an Oscar. And imagine having to play that role with Rita Moreno in the movie. I would be so intimidated, and she killed it. But Rachel Zegler was very, very good in West Side Story. Nobody is denying that the girl can sing. Absolutely, yes.
And dramatic range to play a good Disney villain, and well, Gal Gadot doesn't have it. Her delivery somehow manages to be wooden and scenery chewing at the same time, and when she has to deliver a big musical number, you can pinpoint the exact moment where they swap out her voice with someone who can actually sing.
Well, yeah.
Imagine there's no heaven.
Oh, Gal.
Jonathan is yet another entry into the bumbling, forgettable, non-threatening male sidekick list of modern-day Disney heroes. There's brief moments where it seems like he might be displaying the tiniest bit of attitude and heroism, but then it's immediately squashed to reinforce the idea that men are all just a bit useless. Visually, the film's an inconsistent mess. CGI Cthulhu nightmares aside, the colour scheme ranges from bleak, washed-out grey castles and towns that look like Zack Snyder directed it, to a kind of over-the-top golden yellow piss filter for the CGI woodland scenes that's so excessive it actually makes your eyes start to hurt after a while. It's funny as well because there's like one scene that was filmed on location in a real forest, and the contrast between that and the CGI fantasy version is so jarring, I actually thought the action had shifted to a whole different country. Also, you can absolutely tell this movie's been reshot to fuck.
Yeah.
The kiss scene where Jonathan brings Snow White back to life was absolutely added in later to try to appease fans of the original. Snow White herself has clearly been toned down in places to make her less obnoxious, and I'd be willing to bet about 90% of the bandit's screen time has been cut. Most of them don't even get a single line of dialogue, which once again had me questioning, why the fuck are they even in this movie?
Right.
I think the biggest problem though is the ending. The original movie had the dwarves battle in the evil queen to save
There you
Snow
go.
White, reinforcing the idea of reciprocal kindness and redemption. But here, Snow White has to resolve everything by herself, and the result is that none of the other groups or factions have anything to do. Both the bandits and the dwarves, and even Jonathan, just kind of stand around watching the whole thing play out, and I couldn't help wondering, what is the film even trying to show us here? Snow White as a character seems to be all about equity and shared responsibility,
How boring.
rather than privilege and greedy self-interest, but when it comes to the crunch, she ends up having to do basically everything herself, which negates the very point the movie's been trying to make for the past 2 hours. It's this fundamental inability to understand what it's even trying to say, beyond the crushingly tired princess who saves herself trope that's now become the very cliche it worked so hard to overturn that
And
proves to
nobody
be the
wanted
film's
this.
real undoing. In short, Snow White is a modern-day mess. A film that's basically been a disaster from start to finish.
Correct.
And now that it's finally out there and I've reviewed it, it's something I'm very much looking forward to tossing on the ash heap of history.
Okay, so there's that. Suzetters, I am glad that you're still here because you had talked about the audience score. Yeah, this is the thing. The irony is that the timing of the release of this film could not have been worse. Okay, if this film had been released in, I don't know, 2023 or whenever it started production, 2022, 2023, whatever, it might have had a prayer of making not the entire budget back, but at least not being a giant flop, because back then there was still a willingness to tolerate this girl boss narrative. Now, not so much. Okay, maybe you're right. The point is, not now. Now is the worst possible time to release a movie like this because people don't want it. And audiences have said over and over and over again, they have rejected this theme. They don't want it. Now, just for Suzetters, I found this video, not even knowing you were going to be here, Suzetters. But it's interesting that you said something about the audience score because Tyrone Magnus found something. And we love us some Tyrone Magnus. I love playing his videos on my channel. And it's all about the Rotten Tomatoes score, the audience score. And he's explaining here, why is the audience score so high? What is going on here? So let's listen to what he had to say.
Oh boy. And here we go. All right. So people were getting suspicious last night because couldn't see the audience score. The audience score just wouldn't tally up, would it?
Interesting.
And of course, everybody's thinking something's going on. Also, on IMDb, I had someone from Hollywood that I know that is entrenched in Hollywood let me know that there was something going on with IMDb.
Okay.
And they erased or deleted like 2,000 reviews. And
wow.
He said, you look on Twitter, people are losing their minds over this. Right
Interesting.
because they know what they're doing. So thank you, Hollywood friend. Also, you come and you look at this here. There we go. And what do we have here?
That is crazy.
Course, right? Now, I say of course because we know when it's not a movie that's under any scrutiny or controversy, you can to a certain extent trust Rotten Tomatoes numbers. It's only when controversy rolls around, big controversy for a film or even a video game, like with The Last of Us Part 2, to where you have to question the scores, okay? But it's funny now because even the mainstream media has turned on a lot of woke garbage. So even the quote-unquote paid shills that everyone thinks that they are not liking this film.
Right.
So normally, if it was a film that was not under any controversy or scrutiny, people would say, well, When the critics don't like it, the crowd usually does. So, but you have to keep that caveat in there. So, it is under controversy. The critics don't like it. All of a sudden, the fans do. Now, we all know that if you've been online long enough, that if you want the truth, you're going to have to connect dots. It's not just about going to this source or this verified source.
Yep.
Or this one that's proclaimed to be the truth.
And how is it possible that the tomato meter is at 44%, which is the critics' score, and the popcorn meter, which is the audience score, is at 71%, when we also know goddamn well that the ticket sales were absolutely abysmal? Who is this audience? What audience? Nobody went to see this movie. The theaters were empty. You know, we've seen the pre-sale numbers. Now, it's possible that people showed up the day of or whatever, but in a large theater, there were like 3 or 4 tickets sold, maybe 7, under 10. Where is this audience coming from? And where are these numbers coming from?
Can't do that. You truly can't. You're going to have to connect dots and do your own research on different platforms and with different people and kind of figure it out for yourself. We've all been through this before. You remember Captain Marvel?
Yep.
I'm going to make 2 comparisons here. Captain Marvel and Infinity War. With Captain Marvel, I mean, really? You only needed to go see it. And you knew it was not a hit, and it most likely did not make $1 billion. Why? Well, because all the theaters were empty.
There you
People
go.
were posting pictures of the empty theaters that they were in. People were also saying that the movie sucked. It was a man-hating movie. Misandry made men look like creeps. It retconned thing to make things that made her look like she was just the first Avenger and all this other stuff. And then you went on YouTube, you saw the reviews. The reviews were mediocre to not liking them. Some people liked it, but it was nothing like anything like Infinity War. So you got all that, plus the Rotten Tomatoes score. They took stuff down. People couldn't vote. People couldn't tell how they felt about the movie. People were saying it was brigaded, review bombed, but they didn't talk about how they had very suspicious verified 5 stars, very short reviews. Loved it. I loved it. Took the whole family. Stuff like that. Then you come around to something like Infinity War. Infinity War had great reviews, and Rotten Tomatoes didn't go down. People were posting videos of very full theaters with reactions to Thor landing on the battlefield through the Bifrost and throwing Stormbreaker, breaking the crowd up. Okay, compilations of this, okay? You went to YouTube. Everybody's reviewing it greatly. People loved it. It reached 1 billion. People definitely believed that, okay? Oh, and I forgot with Captain Marvel, bunch of empty theaters, but seats were all sold out.
Oh, there you
Who
go.
was buying them?
Yep.
And I spoke to people in Hollywood, and they said that studios actually do this all the time to make their numbers look better.
Yeah, of course.
This is normal. Yeah. So you connect all these dots, loving reviews from YouTubers, loving reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It's doing numbers, full theaters, pictures of full theaters, videos of full theaters, compilations of fans loving it, to something that had all type of question marks. Which one was most likely the hit?
Right.
Exactly. So, with Snow White, what are we seeing? No one likes it.
Right, nobody.
I haven't seen one review of one person that said that they liked it. Not one. I'm talking about on YouTube. I've seen stuff on Rotten Tomatoes, but nobody trusts Rotten Tomatoes in times of controversy because of this issue and past issues. You can't trust Metacritic neither because of controversy.
Yep.
Like we had with The Last of Us Part 2. I don't trust any of them.
Yeah, I mean, remember that the critics score on Amelia Perez on Rotten Tomatoes was very high. The critical reception was positive. The audience score was in the toilet. The audiences hated the movie. And when the numbers started reflecting how unpopular the movie was, because literally the movie offended everybody, the transgender community, the Mexican community, it offended every community it was trying to pander to. And only then did you see that some of the critics started to backtrack gently. And also, after the Oscar nominations, there were some critics who came out and were like, wait a minute, wait a minute. Because they were cowardly. They didn't want to say what they actually thought of that movie. And I knew that they were lying when they said the music was great. Come on now.
In times of controversy. I'm more likely to trust you during times of non-controversy, but still, I don't trust you. People do not trust mainstream media.
No.
Now, let's take a look at this. So, it appears, wow, the crowd, the audience is loving it.
Sure.
For the most part, right? Click a clicky. I didn't take a look at this. So, top critics, all critics, top critics.
Wow.
Top critics.
Look at that.
Interesting. So, both of them hated it. Verified audience, which is very questionable. It's kind of like, Amazon. Just ways to have a whole lot of fake verified reviews.
And that's a problem.
See, when I buy something on Amazon, for something, especially something that I plan on spending a lot of money on, I look at the reviews, but I also go to YouTube.
Yeah,
and I look
same.
at several reviews.
So do I.
Of that product, and I figure out what I want to do. The difference is with Amazon, I can still get my money back.
Right.
With this, I can't. And many people were posting in my comments, I can't believe you spent money on this. You wasted 20-something. I ain't waste 20-something nothing. Okay, I have a special deal. I paid 53 cents for this movie ticket.
Perfect.
53 cents for this movie ticket. Okay? Tyrone gets the deals. All right? And the movie theater was very close to my house. So I didn't even have to burn a lot of gas. Okay? Yeah. Look at this. Verified audiences. 71. Okay. All audiences? 21.
Wow. Verified audience, 70 something. All audiences, 21%. Holy shit. Boy, oh boy, does something stink around here. Unbelievable. That is really something. What does that tell you?
That's a little funny, isn't it? It's funny how they'll talk about, like I said, the review bombing, but they don't talk about all the reviews that just seem to be a ton of bots bringing it up.
That's right.
So, I've watched several reviews on YouTube from different YouTubers, and even new ones. You know what I mean? I want to get a full spectrum, The only reviews I didn't watch are channels that I don't watch, that I don't like. And if I don't like the channel, I don't watch them.
Yeah, same.
However, if they're brand new, or if they're trusted ones, or whatever, I watch them. I want to see what people were thinking.
And it's worth mentioning that even Grace, whose channel is Beyond the Trailer, Grace, who is a total Disney shill, I mean a major shill, like an unabashed Disney shill, even she had to admit. I mean, she tried. She tried. She found some things to praise about the movie. But overall, even she had to say, man, this movie is not the tea. Okay, it's bad.
Plus, doing my calculations with the quote unquote so-called chills and the audience, and I'm looking at the varying numbers and variables and very possible botting on both sides of downvoting and upvoting the movie. I'm also looking at the fact that people hate woke, the fact that people can't stand Rachel Zegler.
Yeah.
And her saying she doesn't need people's business. I'm putting all this together. See, I'm connecting dots.
Okay, as far as firing the marketing team, I'm not sure. But this is exactly the kind of weak bullshit that drives me crazy. The marketing team did not write the script. The marketing team did not cast these actors to be in the movie. The marketing team didn't fuck it up with the dwarves. The marketing team is not responsible for the horror. The marketing team is not responsible for the egregious, obscene cost overruns in making this movie. The marketing team was not responsible for taking out Someday My Prince Will Come and all of that. The marketing team is not the problem. There is not a marketing team on the face of the earth that could have sold this turkey to the public. The people that need to be called on the carpet, not the director, because apparently the director was being hammered daily by a committee of people who were telling him what to do. So he had a problem. And he's a director with a track record. He knows how to make movies that get butts in seats in a theater. The people responsible are all the people, including the entire board of Disney, that allowed this disaster to continue as long as it did. The fact that nobody muzzled this girl when she was giving interview after interview after interview and making these crazy statements and alienating the audience and being incredibly arrogant and insulting. Remember the old days? I was telling Karsten today, forget the old days when everybody was scripted. There are a lot of actors who are very outspoken politically, a lot of actors. Let me give you one example. Mark Ruffalo is very, very outspoken, okay? Guess when he's not outspoken? When he's promoting a movie, okay? They sit him down and the reporters come through and they ask him the same bullshit questions over and over again. He promotes the movie. Then he goes off on his own and he runs his mouth. Okay, this is how he does it. This is how a professional does it. Rachel Zegler could not shut her fucking mouth for the duration. And what is astonishing is that Disney knew that this film's budget was bloated and that the cost overruns were out of control and that this girl could single-handedly sink the movie if she didn't shut her mouth and nobody talked to her. Or if they did, she wasn't listening. Nobody went to her agent. Nobody went to her manager. Nobody went to her publicist. Nobody did anything. And they just let her run wild. She pissed everybody off, including her co-star, Gal Gadot. It is unimaginable. So all these people who allowed this girl to have free reign to say and do as she liked in the lead up to the release of the movie, and all the people who oversaw the budget, and all the people who saw the rushes day after day and saw that the costumes didn't fit, that the lighting was weird, that the dwarves looked jacked. Everybody needs to answer for their part in creating this mess.
That eventually bring me to my decision. This movie's a flop. People don't like it. People don't like her.
Yep.
People have problems with Disney.
Yep.
This did not work, and I can't believe you even tried to make it work, Disney. After we told you. When she was cast, people told you,
Yep.
what are you doing?
Exactly.
They asked you, what are you doing?
Yep.
When her clips came out, stuff she was saying,
Yep.
people were saying, what are you doing?
Yep.
And then the snowball effect took effect with her continuing to talk, continuing to talk, continuing to talk.
Yep.
You had Dinklage having problems with little people being in the film. Then you took them out. Then you put them back in, but
Yep.
you put them back in CGI. But you did have a real dwarf in there,
Yep.
along with the 7 magical people who ended up being part of the guy that's supposed to be the prince that she falls in love. His merry bandit stealing. Like, this is not Snow White.
No.
And you still went forward with it. And I've always been nice to you, Disney. Even though you and other companies have put out garbage about myself and the rest of us collectively, saying that we're misogynists, saying that we're racist.
Sounds
saying that
familiar.
we're bigots, and all the mentally ill people on the planet that don't have proper critical thinking skills actually really believe it and harass us online. I've been nice to you the whole time.
Why does this sound so familiar? Maybe Disney should start a Girl World channel.
I've never called you idiots like other channels do, and morons, and prayed for your downfall like all the other ones. I've been nice to you. I've said, please just get back on track and give us what we want. I give the fans on my channel everything they ask for.
Yeah, you see
They
this.
still get all the types of videos they ask from me for. They get them all.
Yeah, you know, this is the thing. I mean, for a couple of years now, a Disney company, whether it's Pixar or not Pixar so much, even though Pixar is included, but mostly Lucasfilm, Marvel, whatever, they'll release a movie and they will antagonize the fans. You know, Star Wars fans are very, very passionate about Star Wars, very passionate about the characters, about the storyline and everything. And Disney oversaturated the market with TV shows, with movies, one after the other after the other. And the fans were objecting to the casting decisions, the writing, the acting. There were some exceptions, like my understanding is that The Mandalorian was well received. But overall, it was too many Star Wars movies, too many projects involving side characters that were irrelevant. And the fans were like, wait a minute, this TV show is bad. This movie is bad. And immediately, right out of the gate, what happens? Well, you don't like you don't like this TV show because you're sexist, you're racist, you're a bigot, you're a this, you're a that, you're whatever. So attacking the core audience, in other words, the audience that is guaranteed to show up the day that the movie opens and may go back to see it more than once in the theater, is a bad idea. And trying to intimidate, harangue, or gaslight your core audience is a bad idea. And that's exactly what happened with Marvel. It's exactly what happened with Lucas. It happened also with the Indiana Jones, the latest movie. And people were like, we don't want to see an old doddering Indiana Jones. And who is this Phoebe Waller, whatever her fucking name is? We don't want to see her. We want to see Indiana Jones. And they created a product, and the fans, you know, the ones going back to the year one, you know, people like me who saw the first one, Raiders of the Lost Ark, in the theater when it first came out. I didn't even see the new Indiana Jones movie. I would much rather see the old movies, the Spielberg movies, you know? And so attacking your fan base seems to be a go-to, and that is a problem, and that is something that Disney needs to stop doing. They need to get their directors and their producers and the stars of the shows and the movies to shut the fuck up and stop attacking the core audience, the people who buy the merch, the people who go on message boards and promote your product for free? No. Bad idea.
The only thing I don't do anymore are unboxings. Guess what? Because they don't ask for them anymore. Because my unboxings was of your stuff, things owned by Disney. It was Marvel stuff and Star Wars stuff. People hate Marvel and Star Wars now.
They do.
That's why I don't do them. They don't ask for it anymore, and they don't get views anymore. So as a businessman, why would I continue to do them unless I just wanted to do them? And there are videos I do from time to time that I'm like, this probably ain't gonna get no views, but I got something to say. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it.
still do what I want. So you can still do what you want, Disney, but you still got to give the people what they want.
That's right.
It's got to have that balance. And guess what? It's not truly a real balance. It's not perfectly balanced, as all things should be. It's not. You have to overwhelmingly please the people if you want to be successful. And you know this. I don't have to tell you this. Been successful for a long time, Disney.
Yep.
You chose this route.
That's right.
You chose to eat doo-doo. You are what you eat. You ate doo-doo, and now you're becoming doo-doo. Okay? So if you don't want to fully turn into a dookie sandwich, you're going to have to stop this and give the people what they want.
Yep.
Keep on doing it. You end up selling off. And I hear you're trying to sell Star Wars, and nobody wants to buy it because it stinks.
Isn't that something? They're trying to sell off Star Wars and nobody wants to buy it. What are they going to sell off, though? What is there left to do with Star Wars? They have squeezed that orange and that lemon, and now they're like wringing out the rind. What is there left? They've destroyed Star Wars, one of the greatest properties of the 20th century. They've killed it. They've killed Star Wars completely. And it's really, really sad. And I knew that they were going to have a problem when I went to see The Force Awakens. And that's how I discovered Tyrone Magnus, because he did a reaction to the trailer, and it was so delightful and so charming, and he was so excited. He was so happy, and his enthusiasm was contagious because I could not wait to see it. And when I saw him reacting to the trailer, I thought, oh my God, this guy is my spirit animal. You know what I mean? Like, I totally get his excitement. And I went to see it in the theater. I hated it. I don't remember a single thing about that movie. It didn't have that magic, the Star Wars magic. It just didn't have it. It was a huge disappointment. Let's continue.
Can't nobody save it but Lucas himself. The creator himself. He's the only one that can save it. If he wants to come back, you sell it back to him for pennies on the dollar, and he makes what he wants to make.
Oh, God forbid, though. God forbid. I mean, 4, 5, and 6 were the classics. Those were the ones that I saw in the theater in the 70s and 80s. Then he came out with 1, 2, and 3, and they were awful. So I don't know if Lucas is the guy, although selling it to him, and maybe he can resurrect it, but I think that people are exhausted now. I think Star Wars is over. I don't think anybody can save it. Or maybe you just have to like bury it in a time capsule, and maybe 50 years from now, somebody will open the time capsule and they'll say, oh, I know, I have some ideas for how to make Star Wars better, or how to make it relevant or fresh or fun or whatever. No. Lucas? No. He had his turn. I don't think that's correct.
To fix everything. And that is when Star Wars will truly be fixed. Because you guys are, woo!
It's bad.
You remind me of somebody in one of them stories that's 600 pounds, sitting on the couch, eating all day.
Yep.
And you got nothing but family members enabling you.
Yep.
And you're crying and whining about being overweight, and you're not really doing nothing about it. You're just continuing to do what got you there.
Yep.
10 million subscribers. Hi-ho, hi-ho, it's off the woke we go. Hi-ho, 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 it's off.
I am such a huge fan of Tyrone Magnus. I love this guy. Here you go. If you want to subscribe to him, I've just put his channel in the chat. No, Jen, I have not seen it. And I was telling Karsten that I can't even muster up the energy to go to the theater to hate watch it. That's how bad it is. It's sort of like Joker Folie à Deux. I saw the terrible reviews and I thought, well, God, Joaquin Phoenix is in it. Lady Gaga is in it. How bad can it be? And then I couldn't bring myself to do it. I absolutely loved Joker. I loved it. I thought it was a masterpiece. And, you know, people are always trying to trick me into seeing superhero and comic book movies. And they'll say, oh, it's not really a superhero or comic book movies. People tried to pull that shit with me with Black Panther. And so I decided, all right, I'll watch it on streaming. It was a comic book movie, superhero movie. I don't like superhero and comic book movies. So something has to be really, really special. Joker fell into that category. I thought it was magnificent. I loved it. And I also felt that way about The Batman. The Batman was incredible. And Rob Pattinson surprised me. I was surprised by how good he was, and I loved the look of it. And I loved the way they redid the villains, especially, of course, Colin Farrell as Penguin. But those are exceptions. And so when I saw that Joker 2 was coming out, I thought, oh, okay, and there are musical numbers in it, and I knew that the fans weren't going to like it. But the reviews were so bad that I thought, universally, like across the board, everybody hated it. It wasn't just the fanboys who hated it. It was everybody who hated it. And that's how I feel about Snow White. I mean, I could use a couple of hours in the theater with a bucket of popcorn and, you know, my wicked tumbler of water. But I can't do it. I can't. I'm sure that there's something that's going to come out that's going to be good, that'll give me the opportunity to go to the theater. But I can't. I don't even want to watch it on streaming. You know what I mean? Mickey 17, I heard that that's a good one. And it's playing here, I think. So I will check that out. I will. All right. I am signing off now. If you would please, consider subscribing to the channel. If you want to become a member, the link is at the top. And I appreciate all of you for being here. I love talking about movies. It's such a fun thing. Even when I haven't seen the movie in question, I love talking about movies. I'm still making my way through the Oscar nominations or the Oscar nominated movies. And I'm really, really, really enjoying them. I'm really enjoying them. A Complete Unknown was incredible. I absolutely loved it. If you're a Bob Dylan fan, it helps. If you're not, you probably won't get it. You won't understand what you're watching. But it is wonderful. So if you're a Bob Dylan fan, if you're a fan of folk music, if you're a fan of the American music scene in the 1960s, as a matter of fact, it is so good. It is so good that I was thinking, wow, thank you, Jen. I appreciate it. It was so good. I was thinking, wow, James Mangold has done Walk the Line. So he did Johnny Cash. He did A Complete Unknown, which is Bob Dylan and Joan Baez. I would love to see I would love to see James Mangold do a biopic of the Grateful Dead and a biopic of the Jefferson Airplane, not the Starship. Not the Starship. Basically, the bands that lived in the Haight-Ashbury. That's who I want to see. I would love to see a Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane biopic, and I want him to direct it because he's really got the eye and the ear for the time period and the genre. I think that would be fantastic. Okay. Thank you guys again, and I will see you guys the next time. See you later, guys.